Okay, everybody, want to welcome you to today's Wednesday webinar. This is the monthly webinar series we run here at TimeSolv to give you the tips and tricks to get the most out of the application. I'm going to assume that everyone can hear me okay and that you can see my screen that should have a slide up saying that it's Wednesday webinar. For those that joined us last month, just a quick caveat. This is some new webinar software that we've been using here just recently, and so hopefully we don't run into any bugs, but I think we should be in good shape. I see that some people have found the chat section where you can leave questions. Margie just said, hi, glad to have you here. You should see in the upper right-hand corner of your screen a chat icon and the words chat. That's where I will be taking some questions after the end of the webinar. So let's get started here. Just a reminder that the purpose of these webinars is to go over the TimeSolv tip of the week emails that we send out roughly every Monday. So we do these webinars once a month, meaning I'm generally going to cover 4 topics about various things within TimeSolv. And the way these topics are decided upon is I generally just go to our support team and they do document kind of the support calls and the support questions that come in. So they take a look every week and like, here's what we're hearing from our customers more than usual. And so we decide, well, then that's a good tip of the week that we can push out to all of the owners and administrators of the TimeSolv account. And just so that you all know, I do just send those tip of the weeks to the admins and the firm owners of the account, not all of the individual timekeepers, knowing that a lot of the timekeepers themselves that are not admins or not firm owners probably don't care about some of these tips and tricks and don't need to get flooded with emails from us. But you're always welcome to forward these along to the timekeepers if you think that some of these topics might be of interest for them. So we do this the second Wednesday of every month. So you can mark your calendars now that we will be doing our next Wednesday webinar on Wednesday, August 8th. So August 8th is the time. You can always register at the registration page that you sign up for this one. That link is on our help site. It is also in every tip of the week email where you can register for these webinars. I expect that we'll last about 45 to 60 minutes on today's webinar. Not that I'm hoping that we end before 1 o'clock Central Time here where I'm at, so I can watch the start of the England-Croatia World Cup semifinal game. I'm not saying I'm going to do that. Nobody can say that I'm going to do that. I may have it on another screen somewhere at the time, but we should wrap up before then. And I am recording this session, so we will send out a link to everyone afterwards if you have to drop off early for whatever reason. And then a reminder that in that Q&A area, that chat area, I do ask that you refrain from asking questions until the end, only because I found over time that many people might have a question that I'm going to answer 30 seconds from that time, and you get that question answered and don't need to answer the chat. So if you have some questions over some of the tips that I'm covering, let's just be sure that we wait until the end. I'll open it up and hopefully be able to answer your question. And for those of you that have sat in on the webinars before, as you know, because I'm not, in the total support side, I am the marketing director here. By the way, I don't think I introduced myself. Scott Clayson, marketing director at TimeSolv. That's a big faux pas at the beginning of a webinar. I'm always the host of the Wednesday webinar, but because I am on the marketing sales end of things, I'm not going to pretend that I know as much about the nooks and crannies and the best practices of using TimeSolv as well as our support team does. I feel like obviously I know TimeSolv pretty darn well, but those are the experts who can deal with some of the support questions. So if you have a question I can't answer, I'll be sure to find out the answer and get back to you. Okay, so let's find out what's going to be on our agenda for today. These are the 4 topics that we covered in the last several Wednesday webinars. Some of them will be really fast for us to go through. Some of them we'll spend a little bit of time on how to accomplish these things within TimeSolv. So the first one is one that we've covered frequently, but we do revisit this tip of the week quite often because we want to make sure that all of our clients are aware that we have a portal that you can give access to your clients for them to not just pay invoices, but actually see all past invoices. You could have them see all past time entries, even unbilled time entries, if you'd like them to see the work in progress so they can anticipate what the bill might look like next month. So it's not just a tool to get paid, and we have pushed a lot of this is if you use LawPay to process credit card payments on invoices, this is where you could integrate it straight through the client portal and not have to have your clients access the LawPay client portal. It could all be done within TimeSolv here. And the email that they receive when you send the invoice has a nice big link for them to go to the portal and pay. So we're going to review the client portal, how to set that up. We also have a new feature, and I will show you about how to enable or disable line spacing on the invoices themselves to kind of break up the time and expense entry descriptions. And I'll show you how that works, along with a sneak preview of some other things that are going to be coming very soon in how you format the invoices. Then the third thing, and this will be a kind of a quick thing, is how you can access the invoices directly, sent invoices directly from your matters. And this is a question that comes up actually frequently, where they don't want to look and search, through the long list of sent invoices for particular invoices for a certain matter. And I'll show you how you can do that. It might be just a different way to go about accessing your sent invoices. And then the last thing to touch on is how to set up your invoice auto pay from trust accounts. So if you're a firm that does trust accounting and you are paying your invoices from trust account, one of the big things that you're often required to do is, as soon as an invoice is sent, you're required to move the funds out of your trust account and into your, or mark them as paid, and move to the operating account. So we'll show you how that can be done automatically when you send the invoice, and there doesn't have to be a manual actual movement of the trust account stuff. So that's what we're going to be looking at doing today during this webinar. And again, if you have any questions, we'll be sure to get to those when the time is appropriate. So let's get started right away and talk about using the client portal. We're going to review how to enable and specify the settings that you want for the client portal, how to give permissions to your contacts for a matter so that they can actually access the portal. And then if you haven't set up LawPay, we'll show you how to do that, and I'll show you how a client will actually pay an invoice using the client portal. So let's jump in and get into TimeSolv. I'm logged into the system right now in my dummy account, and we first need to actually turn on client portal access. So where we go to do that is under clients and then settings. And down here at the bottom of this general tab, so the page you land on, you'll see a section about the client portal. And you want to toggle the box that says enable portal, as you know, seems logical. You can also, we give you the option of either allowing or not allowing the people that you give portal access to the requirement to create a login. Some, for security reasons, some people really want to make sure that their clients have to create a username and password to access the portal. But we also want to give the option to firms where if you don't necessarily want to have that extra layer of, some firms go the other direction and like, oh God, my client has to create one more username and password. I mean, how many, I use a password manager. I have several hundred, I think, accounts. It's like, I don't want to deal with one more login for, a username and password. So this isn't required that your clients have to create a username and password to access the portal. But if you toggle this box, it will be required for the users. This next row allows you to determine how much of the time and expense entries you want your clients to see in the portal. And your options are, there's 3 options. They can see all entries that have been made. So that's going to include any work in progress, your WIP. So any unbilled time entries could be visible in the portal if you check that you want all entries visible. You could do just billed entries only then, where they could actually see the time entries that have been placed on an invoice. Or you could say, I don't want them to see any time entries at all, not visible. And that the only time they can really see the time entries is if they're being placed on an invoice. Or perhaps you do fixed fee billing that you aren't required and you don't feel it necessary to put your specific time entries onto an invoice. Then you would say that you don't want to see them. It's not visible. And then same thing for your expense entries, not visible, billed entries only, or every single entry, including unbilled. Then you determine what operating account you want to have invoices paid to, I should say. So in this case, I have, an operating account here that I've set up under my payments, and same thing with operating bank account, where I want it to go here, and I have 2 here to choose from. So, and then you can choose to allow the use of the trust balance when paying invoices. So if you want to allow the customers to actually pay the invoice, if you will, from a trust account, you can do that. That's something that we recommend a lot of people kind of turn off, because trust accounting is something you want to make sure you're dealing with, but you do have that option. So you want to hit save here then, obviously. So that's the first step. You've now enabled the portal. So now let's talk about how you give permissions to your contacts within a matter. So I'm going to go into my clients and matters here. And I have a new client and matter set up called July webinar right here. And then we have the webinar matter. So we want to go under the context tab here. And in this case, I already have Goofy Dog as a contact that is the main contact for this matter. Now I want to grant Goofy Dog rights to access the client portal. So I'm going to click on edit here. And then down in the right-hand column, you see this last row says has portal access, and you want to check that box yes and hit update. And then if you are going to require portal login, this is where you could create it for the client and send them, here's your login name, here's the password that I created for you, and then when they log in the first time with that password, they can change it to something unique that they'd like. Or you can grant automatic portal access, okay? And what that happens is, what that does is it'll send an email now to Goofy Dog, and I got that email here, and I'll show you what it looks like. I just already received the email. It already came, as you can see. That's how fast. 12:13 p.m. I'm in the Central Time Zone, and it says a portal account has been created for you. Please click here to log in, and it comes from Sincerely Laidlaw & Associates, the name of my firm. So I'm going to click on that, and it's going to open me up into this is what the client is going to actually see. And as you can see right now, there's no invoices to pay, but this is where I could see, here's a time entry that I have. I didn't have a description that I put in this time entry, but I have 2 hours at $265, and it was the date of 7/11. So we have WIP, work in progress, 2 hours worth of WIP. The WIP amount is $530. Then you could come back in and here and see all payment history, all payments that I have made to you as your client. And you could see all past invoices here. So you can see this is what they will see. So I'm going to go back now, and because I've been sort of logged in as Goofy Dog, it's going to log me out of my TimeSolv account. This obviously won't happen for you, so I need to log back in here. So let's talk about then how you would go about, and basically that's it, I guess. There's not much more to it. They'll have that login link. You could then, if you see fit, revoke automatic access, as you may have seen. Let's go back to this this matter and my contact, and I'm going to edit. And you can say you could revoke automatic portal access. You'll also see now you can view the portal logged in as that person, and it'll log you out of TimeSolv. So you could, this is another way that you could click once you've actually enabled it to see what the client sees. But let's talk about now how this is one of the great things about the portal. Other than that, there's more visibility now. And one of the, what are you trying to achieve with the client portal is one thing to think about. And I look at it as this is a great way to cut down on some of the calls that might be coming into staff for explanation about invoices. I didn't get my invoice. Where is that other invoice? What payment? Did I make a payment 3 months ago? I don't remember. They can log into that portal and see that information. So it can really reduce the amount of calls that come in and take up, and it's kind of a time suck, especially if you're a solo firm that doesn't have a receptionist, or you're using Ruby receptionist, let's say, as in a virtual receptionist, and they can't obviously answer those type of questions. Having this portal is one way to help reduce that load. So let's talk about then setting up the client portal to actually accept credit card payments. And right now we integrate with LawPay, which is by far the industry standard when it comes to credit card processing for lawyers. They also do credit card processing in the non-legal world as well. So if you're not a law firm on this webinar, they have just AffiniPay that's actually the name of the parent company, and then they have two brand names, LawPay, and then for CPAs they call it CPA Charge. And all three of those, because basically it's the same company, it's just a branding thing, they all work with TimeSolv. So the way you set up your integration between TimeSolv and LawPay is under your payments section over here. So you go under payments to settings, and then under bank accounts, you see I have these edit payment profiles. You can create payment profiles. I'm just going to click on the edit one. And when you go to create it, you're going to get this same thing. It's going to ask you who's your provider. And in this case, we have LawPay as the one provider. And then you have to log into your LawPay account. And there is a way to access a secret key from LawPay. And if you click on this little question mark, it'll take you to the instructions on how to do that. And then once you enter your secret key, it's going to bring up the accounts that you want to associate with TimeSolv, both a merchant account and if you have an ACH account, so that people could pay you essentially via check. It doesn't have to be credit card. You guys have all probably done it before, where you put in your bank routing number, that information that you find on the check, and it'll essentially directly take the money out of their checking account. And then you can check whether you want to have this active or not. So now that you have your LawPay account hooked up to TimeSolv, let me show you exactly how they would see that portal and how they would pay. So I have a time entry for this webinar matter, July webinar, $530. Let's go ahead and generate a draft invoice and send it. Okay, there's our July webinar, $530. It's going to be emailed to them. I'm not going to have it be printed. And that email to them is going to include, to Goofy Dog, it's going to include the big button to log into to go to the portal. So let's go ahead and hit send. Yes, I want to send this. Okay, so now it is off. And I'm going to check my email over here, and the invoice should show up here pretty quick. You can see I'm checking Outlook, and as Outlook kind of tends to be a little bit sluggish. So I guess I should put my hold music on. Well, we could also just go back in here and log in as I showed you before. Go into contacts, go into edit of our Goofy Dog, and view the portal. No, actually, just as I do that, of course, I see the email just came through. So let me show you what the email looks like. This is what it looks like. Okay, so it's a normal email, just like you see, here's the actual invoice, in a PDF file. Thank you for your business. And then boom, click here to view your invoice. This is going to take them, I'm going to click on it. It's going to take us to the same page as before, this select invoices to pay. Actually, it takes them straight to the invoice. I take that back. So now you see an invoice and you can see it here as the PDF. You can view the whole invoice. If I go back to my just general invoices, it's going to show, you know, the one invoice here. Again, if I click on the number, it's going to take me, it's going to download it. If I click on the amount, that's what's going to take me to what we just saw. And then you can click pay here, or from that invoice screen back here, if you check the box, look what's going to happen over here. If you check the box, you can pay here. You click on pay, and again, this is what the client is seeing, not you. You can choose, okay, $530. I'm going to pay via credit card. And this is actually LawPay's integration now. You're going to put in the card number, all that information, blah, 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 submit payment. And pay via bank account is if you're using the ACH routing, so the routing number, account number, and so on and so forth, and submit payment. So you can see that that invoice got sent out at 12:19 p.m. That's the one I received, and at 12:21 that invoice could be paid. Now that's probably not always going to happen, but just understand that if you struggle with collections, by enabling the portal, hooking yourself up with LawPay, and allowing both credit card payment and essentially check payment, you're likely to get paid much faster than if you're going to send an email to the client with the invoice as a PDF and just wait for them to write a check and send it in the mail, or wait for them to call you to give you the credit card number, and then you're going to then punch it in by hand using LawPay. I know a lot of people will do that. They might have a LawPay account, they don't have any integration set up, so they have the client call them. And I've done that for some law work I had to get done, where I wanted to pay via credit card. Once I got the invoice, I had to call them, give it to them over the phone, and they ran my credit card, which is very antiquated and frankly is not as secure. It's not considered as secure by the credit card industry as doing it this way. Okay. All right, so that's how you would enable the client portal. That's how you would set everything up. And I believe let me get back into TimeSolv here. I believe I accidentally closed out the window there. Do it as its own standalone tab. Okay, so that's how we go about enabling the client portal, how we go about setting it up for our contacts, giving them access to the portal, how you go about when you send the invoice, allowing them to pay via credit card or ACH payment. All right, so let's go on to our next topic. We want to talk about how to enable and disable the invoice line spacing. So where you're going to edit the billing template, and then I'll talk about some other upcoming feature enhancements. One thing I want to do here real quick when I go back to TimeSolv is I'm going to take that draft invoice or that sent invoice for the July webinar, and I'm actually going to void it back to draft, and I'm going to delete the draft as well then because for other purposes for later on in the webinar, so I'm going to void that. Okay, so let's talk about let me see if I can find an invoice that has a bunch of time entry descriptions. That just has one time detail. So here's what I'm going to do. I'll just do another time entry. Let's do that same July webinar. So let's edit this one. And we're going to have the description here. And I'm going to use my abbreviation. So TRT. Update that so it's got a big long description, and then let's do another one for July webinar, and let's say it's going to be 2.25 hours, and again I want to do let's do RR, boom, here's my abbreviations, save and new. Let's do one more. So July webinar, another 2 hours, and it's a conference call. Okay. So we have these 3 time entries with descriptions. Now, by default, when we create a new draft invoice for a July webinar, and we create that draft, if we go to view the draft here by clicking on that microscope or the eyeglass icon, you'll notice how these entries are boom, 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 really kind of snug up against each other, and it lacks some readability. And so we've had some feedback from some clients where they really wanted the ability to put some space between the descriptions. So we allowed that to happen. And in one of our last releases, we allowed you to determine if you'd like to have extra space in the billing template area. So again, to edit a billing template, and we can do this straight here, there's one of two places. You can either go to under invoices and settings, and then there's a tab for your billing template, a flexible billing template, or you can just click on the dollar amount of your draft invoice. So we're going to click on the dollar amount. We have our template here, flexible billing template, and let's edit the template. Now, under the time and expense tabs, we have a new little button here, or row in this column, extra space between rows. I'm going to toggle that yes. Well, I'm not toggling it yes. I'm toggling it on, turning it on, and I'm hitting update. And now when I download this draft invoice, now I have some space between these time entries. It makes the readability a little bit better, especially if you have long time entries, or if you have, I shouldn't say time entries, if you have long descriptions for your either time or expense entries, then that readability got to be an issue. So you can see now I've put a little bit of space, basically just like a return, and it makes it just a little bit more readable. So by default, on that template, it's going to remain off, but under both the time and expense tab, you can say you want extra space between rows or you don't want extra space between rows, okay? Now, while we're in the billing template, I should tell you that I had a sneak peek earlier this week on our latest release to production that's going to impact how our invoices can look. And there's two things that are going to happen. First, I should also show you, if we download this invoice one more time, some of you may have noticed that when we made that change to allow that extra space between our descriptions, the descriptions themselves are now justified, as you can see, both left and right justified. And while that, again, a lot of firms really want that, and they think the invoices look neat and tidy, there's also a lot of people who don't like it, and we heard from them. So in this next release that's coming out shortly, might be by the end of this week, you're going to have on this global settings tab in here, you're going to have the ability to either turn that justification on or off. You also are going to have the ability to change the font size of the invoices themselves, and you're essentially going to have three options: small, medium, large. And by default right now, the font size for our invoices is a 9-point font. And the reason why it's a little bit restricted is because of these columns basically that get created when we generate an invoice. There doesn't give us a lot of flexibility, but we've been working on making that a little bit more flexible. And like I said, by default, this is a 9-point font. That is what it will be when we have this new release, considered the small font. The medium font will be 10-point, and then our large font, quote unquote, will be 11-point. So you'll have three different font size options to set on the billing template. You'll have the option to either turn the justification of your descriptions on or off, and you'll have the option to have that extra space between rows of the invoices. So a lot of kind of things happening with the flexible billing template to make the presentation of the invoices as a little bit more customizable than previous. Okay, so that is tip number 2 so far. I'm going to check to make sure. I see somebody was saying go go Croatia. That might have been, I just am now coming across that, looking again. I have to say I'm cheering from England only because I'm a big Tottenham Hotspur fan in the Premier League, and it seems like half the English team is from Tottenham. So I was happy actually to see France go through yesterday because their goalkeeper is Tottenham's goalkeeper. So soccer aside, let's move on. Tip number 3 is about, and this is a quick one, accessing your invoices from matters. I'm kind of surprised this has come up, but our support staff said, yeah, you know, we get this question from time to time, and we really should go over it. And the fact that the invoice tab within your matters is a great place to view all invoices that you sent for a particular matter. And it's also an area where you can record payments. And this is where it kind of came up more than anything, I think, is the ability to, you know, record. You get a check from a particular client and matter, and you want to record the payment, but you just always sort of live in the matter screen in TimeSolv, and you just want to access it quickly. So let me show you where you would go about doing that. If you go into the clients and matters, and actually let me go back and let me make sure I have some, go into a client matter that has some unpaid invoices. I'm going to go to my sent invoices here. Margie, you asked the question, can we turn the no charge on and off? You mean on the billing template? Let's talk about that after I get done with other things, and we'll take a look at that. So let's see, I have some Wednesday webinar client. Let's take a look at that. Okay, so I'm viewing my client here, and you have all the normal tabs here. I think a lot of people skip over this. If you click on the invoices tab, you'll see all the invoices that have been sent to that client. And if they're unpaid, any unpaid invoices, you'll see this $sign. Well, it'll show the balance, first of all, as 0 if it's been paid. If it hasn't been paid, then you can click on this, you know, little pay icon, and it's going to take you right to the payment screen. It's already going to pre-populate the client and matter. It's going to be that it's a payment. By default, we're going to say it's a check. We don't pre-fill the amount for what the invoice amount is because we don't assume that the payment is necessarily for the full amount of the invoice. It could be, but we don't assume that it's going to be. So that's the main kind of gist of that. So that's an easy place for you to view all the past invoices. The other places where you can do that, of course, if you go to sent invoices, and you just run a search criteria here of, like, say Wednesday, and hit, you know, and have a date of going back, you know, a year, let's say, Wednesday webinar. Why is it not bringing up? I should have a webinar there. Let's go with client. There we go. Oh, it's because I abbreviated the name of the client as WED, not Wednesday. So you can see, you know, for anybody that has the word client in them, here are the ones that came up. So if I just did, let's do webinar. I have like a February webinar. But anyway, this is the point where you can see, like, all the invoices that were sent for, like, you know, to anybody who met the search criteria. So if you had a client, I know, like Best Buy, for example, is a client that I have set up here in my account. Here's all the invoices I've ever sent to Best Buy. You know, $47,000 worth of work that I've done for them, and boy, it looks like they haven't paid a thing, or they've paid maybe $1,000 worth of stuff. So, you know, they obviously owe a lot of money. And again, you could just do payments here, boom, 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 for all of these invoices as you see fit. So that's another way to view the invoices quickly for a particular client, and for the matter too. For that, you know, if you have, for example, Samsung is one of the matters that I've worked on. Here's the 3 invoices I've sent to Best Buy for this specific matter and what they owe and so on. So I personally think this is a better way to go about looking for the invoices that you've sent to for a particular client or matter, but just understand that you can access that through the invoices tab when you're viewing a matter itself. Okay. All right, so that was a quick tip as well. So let's get into our last tip, and this is kind of a longer one. We're going to talk about how to set up auto pay of invoicing from trust accounts. So trust account, as I mentioned at the top, it's a big deal. Oftentimes it's required by states where as soon as an invoice is sent to a client, you have to move that money out of the trust account into the operating account, whatever it might be. So in TimeSolv, you can actually set it up so that when you have a trust account for a client, when you send the invoice, it'll automatically pay that invoice immediately and deduct it from the trust account. You don't have to go about moving a payment, allocating a payment from the trust to the invoice like you allocate other payments. So I'm going to show you how you enable that within the matter, how you change the client settings, and then how the invoice will actually kind of look in that scenario. Because the other thing that you can do is you can even set it up so that if the trust account balance falls below a certain dollar amount, the invoice, the next invoice that is sent will auto replenish up to whatever amount you want. And I'll show you where you can do that. So again, this is for those who do lots of trust accounting. So let's step back and take a look at, like, first, how do we go about, I'm going to take these time entries and that invoice, and I'm going to, for the July webinar, and void those back to draft as well, just for the purposes of what I'm going to be doing here. So I have my July. Oh, I did, I guess, in back to draft. Oh, I did delete those. That's right. Okay. So now I just need to delete. I think I don't want all these time entries. I'm going to, what's this, pending? Oh, because I did. Okay. Gotta think here. I want to payments. Maybe that's why. You know what I'm gonna do? I'm just gonna create a whole new client in Matter. Just start from scratch. It'll be easy. July. And then let's create a Matter. Webinar. And by the way, I hope everyone noticed this when, if, to set up a trust account, to get this trust tab for a Matter, you have to make sure you go under payments and settings, and it's real easy to enable trust accounting and hit save. So if you're already doing trust accounting in TimeSolv, you should already have this in place. But I just wanted to double check for anybody who might have to create a trust account. This is where you enable it under payments and settings. And then that will create, when you have a new client in Matter, under the Matter itself, you will have a trust tab. And if you've set up a trust account in your settings, when you set up a bank account, and I have what I call the IALTA one that most people would probably have, and you determine when you create a new bank account whether it's a trust account or an operating account. It's that simple, and you put in your bank name and that sort of stuff. Okay, you can always create another. If you have two trust accounts for whatever reason, you can call it IALTA 2, whatever you want to call it. You're allowed to have as many trust accounts and operating accounts as you see fit. As you can see here, I have 3 operating accounts and 1 trust account, so it can get as sophisticated as you need it to get. Okay, so if I am in this July webinar, and under the trust account here, this is where you can create the trust account for this Matter. And you can click on here and say, yeah, I'm going to set up this trust account, and we're going to call it retainer. This is where you can determine a couple of things. You can auto pay invoices from this trust, and if you uncheck this, we're going to uncheck this box to start. And then this is where you could designate that if the trust balance falls below a certain number, then the invoice will automatically replenish it back up to where it should be replenished to. Okay, so right now I'm not going to do anything with it. Auto pay invoices from this trust. I've unchecked that box. I'm going to hit save. So now I'm going to go in and I'm going to do traditional kind of like I'm going into payments to my trust account and I'm going to make a trust deposit. So July webinar, I has a retainer account here. It's a deposit. The deposit is $1,500 and this is the opening retainer deposit. Okay. And then it marks it down here. It shows that I have this, $1,500 credit. So let's do like a time entry for this particular. So we got July webinar. We have 2 hours worth of work, save and new, and there it is, $530. So let's send an invoice. Oops, I got to create a draft invoice first, don't I? So right now everything is the same. You're doing, whatever you would normally do, no matter how they're going to pay. So they're $530 invoice. We're going to check this box. We're going to send it. Now, because we sent it and because of trust rules, we want to make sure we allocate that trust or that invoice, or we want to make sure we allocate funds from the trust against that invoice to mark the invoice as paid. Because now if we go to our sent invoices, we're going to see there it is, the sent invoice, and it hasn't been paid yet. There's still a $530 balance. So we need to go back to payments, back to trust, and you'll notice now this just showed up. We have our retainer balance. I'm looking at the client in matter, July webinar. I have $1,500. Now I can allocate money to an invoice now that I have a sent invoice. That button wasn't there before, that link. So we're going to click on allocate. It's going to tell us that we have this invoice 201 for the date of July 11th. The invoice amount is $530. We have a balance of $1,500 here, so that's the available funds. And we're going to transfer money from the trust account and allocate. So transfer and allocate, hit save, and it's going to show me we now have $970 in our trust account. And the transactions that we actually transferred to the operating account. Of course, you have to actually go and do that yourself, actually go to your bank or do it online, whatever you do to transfer the money. But this is where you can have this all recorded. And now it's going to show when I go back to that sent invoice that the invoice has indeed been paid. See right there, it's paid. Takes a bit of a process to do that, as you could see, maybe a little bit more work than you want to do. So let's back that all up and void out everything we're talking about here. So oh, whoops, I'm going to go into trust. No, I do want to go to payments. That's right. And I want to back up that payment. That's right. I want it all. There it is. I'm going to void this trust transfer. So I'm going to void that out right now. Okay, and then I'm going to go to this invoice. I'm going to move it back to, I'm going to check it. I'm going to void it back to draft. This is, one way of understanding that if you have a screw up of some sort, you can unravel it almost always. You just have to start with the, where's the first piece of thread? And usually it's going to be a payment. So if you have an invoice that you want to send back to draft, or you have a time entry that you've already sent out an invoice and you have to edit the time entry, you have to start with the last thing you would have done, which is maybe allocate a payment. So void the payment, then void the draft from sent back to, or from sent to draft, then go to your draft and void the draft. Then you'd be able to edit the time entry, for example. So I'm going to do July webinar. I'm going to void that back to draft. Okay, so now when we go under our trust here, and we'll see we just have that original retainer deposit of $1,500. But now I'm going to go into this particular matter, and I'm going to go to my trust account. I'm going to click on it to edit the trust account. And I'm going to say, if the trust account falls below $500, I need to have it replenished back up to $1,500. And I want to auto pay invoices from this trust. I'm going to hit save. So now let's run that same invoice again from that same time entry. So let's go to drafts, new draft invoice. I'm going to go under here, down here to July, hit create. There it is, $530. I'm going to check the box. I'm going to send it. Okay, now I'm going to go to my sent invoices. Notice that it's already marked as paid. It's already paid. I didn't have to do anything. If I go down into my trust, now it's showing that transfer to operating. You don't have to do that allocation. Okay, so you already have the $1,500 credit. You have $530 went against it. You have $970 left. Okay, and it's going to show all that on the invoice as well. If we click on the invoice and we scroll down, it's going to show that the total was $530. We have a replenish below $500, replenish to $1,500, but we have $970 total available for the client. You know, so it's going to give you a whole summary here that we basically subtracted, we transferred. We have invoice 202. This was the transaction. There was a payment from trust. The payment was applied to this invoice, and now you have $970 in your trust account, and that, you know, you have a $970 total available credit for the client right there. So now let's take a look and see what happens when we drop below that $500. So let's go make another. Well, first of all, I'm going to take that. Yeah, we can do it this way. Yeah, another time entry. And again, we're in July webinar, say 2.25. So now we have, you know, we have $609. So now we know that we're going to drop down below that $500 threshold when we go to pay this invoice. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's create another draft. July, continue. There it is, $609. Check the box. We're going to send it. We hit OK. We go to our sent invoices. It's again showing that it's paid. If we go to our trust account, it's going to show now that our current balance of our trust account is $360.50. So we should have then on this invoice the remittance that they need to, money they need to pay to replenish it back to $1,500. So it's showing $609. Here's the time details. Here's the statement of account. Okay, so we've applied the payment. This is showing the stuff from the last invoice, other invoice that we sent as well, invoice 202. So it's giving us that whole statement of account thing for the month. Showing the balance, trust balance here of $306, because we transferred both $530 and then $609. And now it's showing that total balance due for the client is $1,139.50 to get us back up to $1,500. Our requirement was $500. The trust is now at $360. We need to get it back up to $1,500. So now our client owes us $1,139.50 to replenish the trust, and that's on the remittance copy here now that they need to include with their payment. Total balance due for the client. Okay, so that's an easy way to make sure that you don't have to do any extra work to get money replenished for a trust account. You know, the other option, if you need to, and again, you got to do it by hand, is you can go under invoices to retainers, and you can generate a retainer invoice. So if I had, like that first scenario where I didn't auto pay from, you know, the trust account, and I didn't have the replenish below, replenish above, replenish to, then I'd have to, you know, send out a retainer invoice when it got to that $300 saying you owe, and I'd have to do the math, $1,500 minus, you know, blah, 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 $1,100. But this is all now done automatically by setting it up over here at the client and matter level. Okay. And now you'll also be able to see when you hit trust, here's all of the documentation of what happened as well here. The fact that we had, you know, a debit of $530, a debit of $609. It was transferred to operating. When you hover over this, it's going to show you the invoice number and how much was allocated and the date and all that good stuff. Okay, So now, and it shows this is now our balance, $360.50 for this trust account. So it's all right there for you to see and view. So hopefully that makes sense. Okay, so that's the how you'd use the trust accounts and replenish up to a certain amount if it falls below a certain amount. And how, more importantly, I think, how to auto pay those invoices, mark your invoices as paid automatically as soon as you send that invoice, saving you some time and hassle. So any questions here? It's about 12:50 my time here in Minneapolis. I told you it'd be about 45 minutes to an hour. We have about 10 minutes left at the most. Any other questions? Now, Margie, I know you wrote, can we turn the no charge on and off? And I think you meant in the, not being able to show, I guess I need a little bit more explanation of what you're talking about. In the flexible billing template, are you talking about if you don't, you could do, if you don't want a no charge to show up on the invoice, then I would just, instead of marking it as a no charge, then I would mark that time entry as non-billable. So let me go back. I guess if this is perhaps, oh, you don't want to see the words no charge, you want to see a 0. I don't believe we have a way to change that. Let me double check. I don't think. You keep asking for it. You cannot do that yet. Okay. So you were hoping I would have the right answer. Okay. You keep asking for it. I'm sure there's a ticket then that's been created to allow you to change the verbiage on there so it doesn't say no charge. But that's another thing that you guys are kind of getting the first sneak peek at this. In fact, we just sort of finalized it this morning that we're going to be rolling out an idea portal for our clients that will allow you to submit feature request ideas. And let me show you what that's going to look like. It still hasn't hit prime time yet. You are the very first TimeSolv clients to ever see this. But this is where you would share an idea that you would like to see TimeSolv, either it's a bug or it's a fix or it's just a feature request. And then once people have ideas in place, you could choose, I want it to be something from the mobile app or the web app. You submit your idea and share it. Then people can upvote for that idea. And you may have seen this before. It's the idea of kind of crowdsourcing ideas, in that if, for example, Margie, your idea, since your idea is like, hey, I want to be able to see 0 instead of no charge on there, and there's a lot of people that agree with you, you'd submit that idea right here, and then people could upvote. And if we see that it reaches a certain threshold, our dev team will take that on. So we're just going to roll this out. You'll see more about this in like the tip of the week I'm going to send out next week, and other ideas that you think would be ways for TimeSolv to get better at what we do. So consider yourselves on the forefront, the cutting edge of seeing the way that we want to get feedback from you all on how to make the product better. Any other questions at this point about what you saw today? As always, you can, if you do have other questions, maybe right after this webinar ends, you can always email us, support@timesolv.com, our 1-800 number. You also, everyone, you have a dedicated account manager who you can always call. If you don't know who your account manager is, you can email me and I'll let you know who it is. And Margie said on to the soccer. Yeah, we are getting done just in time. So thank you all again very much for joining me. We'll be here again next, well, I shouldn't say next Wednesday, second Wednesday in August 8th. Join us here and we'll crank out more tips and tricks for TimeSolv. So thanks everybody. Have a great rest of the day. Enjoy the World Cup semifinal and a great weekend as it comes upon us. And we'll see you in a month. Thanks everyone.